Hi, and welcome to Dear Art Producer. I am your host, Heather Elder, and today is September 19th, 2024, and we are joined by George Qatsha, Executive Producer, Global Brand Creative Production, and Social Impact Producer. George is a marketing and advertising pro with tons of experience in entertainment media and brand-focused companies. He's all about visual storytelling, whether it's for film or print, and he loves bringing ideas to life. He is great at pulling together teams from different areas to hit tight deadlines and make sure everyone's on the same page. Plus, he's a go-to guy for balancing creative visions and business needs. He's worked on such cool accounts as Apple, Nike, Airbnb, Google, Sonos, Delta, VW, Target, and Uber. Welcome, George. Hello.
Heather, hi.
Hi. I'm so happy to have you on the show today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's always an honor to be in your company.
Oh, you're sweet. Thank you so much. And you are in LA today, and I am in New York, and I've got the sunny 80-degree weather, and you have the cloudy skies, it sounds like.
Oh, welcome to clouds.
I know, when we were talking earlier, I'm like so ready for the 80-degree weather to be over. So it's fall here. We need to like break out our fall clothes. So
I could agree more. And unfortunately, here in LA, it's going to be a while before that happens for us.
Yeah, I think so too.
This is just a rare day.
Yeah, well, enjoy it while you can.
Thank you.
And thank you for being on the show. I like to start off in the beginning, just kind of getting to know you a little bit, or letting our audience get to know you, and having you share a little bit about kind of the background of how you got to where you are. I feel like in our industry, I love the idea that we all come from such different places and different paths, and you don't have to go back to the way from the beginning, but whatever you think is relevant to kind of explain where you are today. I'd love for our audience to know a little bit more about you.
Sure, absolutely. My pleasure. What I think a lot of people don't know is that I went to Art Center College of Design, and I had a BFA in photography. So my career started out as a photographer. And I bring that up because it's relevant when I'm in my current role and current position in searching for talent, because I look through a different lens than maybe some other producers do. At the beginning of my journey, I decided at the very beginning not to pursue photography, but I still wanted to remain in the world, in the space of visual storytelling. And that's how I ended up in production and producing content.
That's great. I think having that insight has got to make you a really strong producer. I know that my early days as working as an account person really helped me to understand what it meant to be an agent and how to work with agencies. And not that I couldn't do it without that background, or you couldn't do what you do without that background, but I do think it gives you a bit of a different perspective and a unique one. So your clients and the people who work with you feel fortunate for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not widely known, and I don't always share that, and I don't know why. There's no reason why I don't share that information, but I just thought that this was an opportunity to really help inform, the broader community that, when I am looking at a project to support, and I'm looking at talent, it is through the lens of having that in my background.
Yeah. No, that's great.
Yeah.
So tell us what it is like to be an executive producer. Let's back up for a second, because your title is Executive Producer, Global Brand Creative Production, and Social Impact Producer. I mean, I can guess what all of that means, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that title.
Sure. So the majority of the content that I've produced over the years has mainly touched global. I've always worked on the global side of the business with much of the brands that I've touched over the years. The social impact part of it came into play in 2020 during the pandemic, when a friend of mine asked me to join him on some social impact efforts. And obviously we were all sitting around doing nothing during that time. And being a producer and A-type and OCD, sitting idle is not something that I'm comfortable with. So if there was anything I could do to help anyone's efforts at that time, paid or not paid during the pandemic, I was happy to do it. And it really filled the philanthropic piece of my heart that I've always had, but have never really had time to participate in because of the craziness of our work life and commuting and so on and so forth. So whenever there's an opportunity where I can participate in any kind of like social impact work, I'm happy to contribute and weigh in or do what I can to help the effort.
That's great. So what are some examples of that, some things that you've worked on that you're really proud of or excited about?
Well, during the pandemic, obviously, mental health was something that was at top of mind for everyone. As you know, myself, I was home for that whole year alone, and it affected, as we now know, a lot of people who are currently suffering from anxiety, depression, or trying to manage their lives as a result of that time being spent alone. So there was some mental health awareness efforts, mental health and depression, I should say, awareness efforts that a friend of mine was involved in, and during literally smack dab in the middle of the pandemic in 2020, that he asked me to participate in and help try to produce some work and to get the word out.
Oh, that's great. So you're constantly looking for more opportunities to kind of show up in that space?
I'm always open to them. I don't know if I can honestly say that I'm actively always looking, but I'm always in conversation with friends, people in the business to learn more about what's going on in that space. And I'm happy to jump in and contribute when and if I'm needed.
Yeah, I'm seeing that more and more. I'm seeing some producers start to put line items in for, a certain percentage of the production goes to, some sort of social cause, and other people finding ways to, bring certain of their values to the production. And I think that's really healthy for our industry. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. We live in a different time where consumers want to know, especially what brands are involved with what philanthropic efforts. It's really important to them. And I also think on the back end, it's important for us producers or the people, behind the scenes to also contribute and participate in any and all efforts that mean something to you.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I mean, if you think about what your value, if you think of yourself as a consumer, not a producer, right?
Correct.
And what values are, there's so many choices out there for products and services.
Right.
You obviously are going to choose products and services that align with the values that you have. So why not, as an artist or as a producer, kind of be a bit more vocal with what your values are, because you're going to attract other people who have those same values in your work world. So that's really important. So that's great. Okay, so what would be helpful for artists and reps to understand better about your job?
Well, that's a bit of a loaded question, to be honest, because there's so many layers to the uniqueness of the role that I've carved out in the industry, because I have bounced back between agency and brand direct side of the business. So I have found the sweet spot in the industry where I have become, let's say, call it a conduit to bridge the conversations and discussions and workflow between agency and brand. Now, when I'm on the agency side, I am not always the conduit, because we have, the account team, the account supervisors that usually are client facing. When I'm on the brand side is when I am oftentimes dealing with agencies and trying to manage the workflow of the agencies. So where it has helped, I will say, is that internally at the brand, there's not always a sense of urgency that agencies have to keep things moving, to meet the deadlines that have been set forth and that they are held to. So producing internally on the brand side allows for me to sort of, how should I put this, light a little bit of a fire, and put a sense of urgency on my team, who is ultimately overseeing the agency, to keep things moving and to keep within scope and to make sure that things aren't going off the rails. Yeah.
It's such a good thing to point out, because we all sit on this side and we're like, what the heck? Like, we had to hurry up and get our bid in and get our treatment in and get it there immediately, with less time than we really should have most of the times.
Right.
And the agency has an equal sense of urgency, right?
That's right. Yep.
Then all of a sudden it's just hurry up and wait.
Hurry up and wait is the most painful thing. And I know this firsthand because, I have worked on the agency side for many, many years. And just as though I am rushing you all to get your bids in and to get your treatments into me so that I can present, the hurry up and wait, it happens for us as well. And I would say a lot of times it's because people working on the brand side are chasing their bosses or may be fearful to push a little bit harder to get answers to keep the agency moving. So we live in a space and time right now where there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. But what I have noticed is that with all this restructuring that's happening with a lot of companies, there is the awareness to reduce a lot of the cooks in the kitchen and really place decision makers to keep the train going forward.
And it's important. It really is important because everything takes longer nowadays and there's so much more time and effort put into something.
Right.
And the longer something drags out, it gets diluted, I think. And I feel like it even ends up going away a lot of times.
Yeah. I mean, that's truthfully speaking, that can be a pain point for me when I'm working on the agency side, to be honest, because I know the amount of work, the amount of effort, the amount of time that artists, their reps, everyone involved, production companies are putting into getting myself and my team the requested documents so that we could present and get approvals. So I speak for myself and probably a lot of other producers that we feel the same frustrations.
Yeah.
It is a painful experience at times, not all the time, but at times it could be a very painful experience because in our world, all we're looking at is a calendar where the time keeps ticking by, knowing that we have to deliver something by a date that has been set forth.
Well, and it's funny because the client's not looking at that calendar thinking, oh my gosh, I'm taking more days to reply, therefore we're going to have to push out the delivery date.
That's
They're
correct.
just thinking, well, yeah, I don't have time to reply or I can't. I'm not saying they're cavalier about it. There's always reasons, but it's unfortunately it's not a very fluid schedule sometimes.
No, it's not. But also being on the internal side of things at the brands, they are juggling a lot of projects, a lot of things, and oftentimes understaffed. So they have more on their desktop than they can really keep up with, which is why things get delayed, pushed back, or pushed around. But I wouldn't say that there's no awareness on the brand side of what needs to be accomplished. I just think that there's a lot on people's plates.
Yeah.
And a lot of juggling.
Yeah, I definitely can understand that. So let's talk about kind of recent projects, over the last year that you've worked on. Like, are there any trends that you see that those clients were asked, or like the type of projects they're asking for? Were they all motion or stills in motion, or were they CGI and animation, that kind of stuff? What kind of projects are they asking you?
I would say it's a mixed bag.
Yeah.
Truthfully speaking, yeah. I will, if I'm going to speak to, photography and in motion, I will say no photographer is considered if they don't have motion and they're real, because of these hybrid motion still compact shoots, because of budget efficiencies, scheduling efficiencies. That's like the hot button word, efficiencies. So I would encourage any photographer who doesn't have a reel put together to put a reel together and to make sure that it's featured on their social channels, on their website, and really put it out there. Because from a financial standpoint, it is more economical and an easier route for us to approach a photographer who has motion in their background. Mm-hmm. Because there's more creative fluidity that we can count on. There's more creative consistency. And we're engaging one creative to execute all of the needs. In my experience, it hasn't been as easy approaching a director to execute stills. It's always been more successful for me to approach a photographer who also has directing and motion in their background.
Yeah, I was having this conversation with another rep the other day, and this is by no means am I lumping everyone into the same.
No, of course.
There are people who do lots of different things, but just in general, you know, as a rep who represents photographers who have become directors, I find that when we are approached with a job that has both, the care and the attention that is put into both is very different than when we are approached to be a still shooter on a motion shoot, right? We get a very small portion of the time and the energy of that production.
Correct.
As opposed to when we're doing both. It could be the exact same shoot, you know, that we're handling both, or we're just shadowing. And it's really different. And it's really interesting to see what the agency is valuing, or the client or the brand is valuing at that point. And it's frustrating sometimes. I mean, it's easy. Yeah. We're happy to do it. But we know we can do both. And, you know, we wish there were more opportunities to do both sometimes.
Yeah, I will say, as a producer who has been put in that situation before, where I've had a director and they've had to bring separately a photographer on my set to shoot the stills, because I look through the lens that I do in terms of talent, I have absorbed the onus to make sure that there's adequate time dedicated for that still photographer to not feel rushed, to be able to execute the stills that they've been tasked to do, and to feel comfortable on set in advance, making sure the director and photographer have met and there's some synchronicity between the two and respect, because nothing has made me more frustrated than having a professional on my set who doesn't feel valued.
So what advice would you have for a stills photographer who is on set shadowing, motion? What advice would you have for them in terms of how to make the most of that situation?
I would say to encourage an introduction to the director as early on as possible, and for them to develop a rapport and a relationship in advance to stepping on that set. But again, the onus really is on the producer to make sure that the two parties come together, that there's cohesion, and that there is mutual respect for each other's disciplines and each other's roles on set. But I would encourage them to really reach out to the director and develop a rapport if they don't know them already.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's first and foremost the most important part.
Because at the end of the day, we're all there for a collective effort. We're all there to get the job done. And we're all there to make dreams come true, whether it be your own for just being on set, or whether it be for the client who's paying for the whole production to make the campaign happen. But it's a collective, collaborative partnership. And I think that if people go into it with the mindset that it is a collaborative partnership more than this is my shoot, this is mine, this is my, that's it. People need to reframe their thinking a bit.
Yeah.
And understand that we're all one big, hopefully happy team. You know, here for one collective effort.
Talk to me a little bit about how artists are connecting with you right now, and even reps. And is there a more effective and useful message that kind of rises to the top? Or do you just kind of like to see what an artist is up to?
Again, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. I would say if I had to break it all down, reps email me. Photographers reach out to me on Instagram, to my personal Instagram. And I am always digging and always researching and always asking producer friends about new people or doing my own personal research. So it's a little bit of a mixed effort there. I will say that I'm generally speaking, in my personal life, I'm a very private person, and my Instagram accounts are private. So while I am constantly requested by people to follow me on Instagram, I prefer to actually to follow them, so I can retain the privacy of my personal life. But I would say that talent usually reaches out to me on social media.
And how about those emails? Do you feel inundated with them? Do you feel like it's really depends on the day if you get to look at them or not? It's a timing thing. Like I asked earlier, like, is there something that resonates with you or rises to the top as more successful or effective? What are your thoughts?
We all live in our devices. Let's be honest about that. Like, anyone who doesn't respond to an email or doesn't feel inclined to respond, we all live in our devices. I see all the emails and I look at all the work that comes through. I will say some stand out more than others for various reasons. Some of those reasons are just opening up the body of the email. I'm a visual person. So if you hit me with gorgeous, stunning visuals and not a lot of it, I'm clicking and I'm going right into what you're there to show me. If there is too much text, too much explanation, too much body, I just really skim down to the visuals.
Yeah.
Because I want to see what's going on.
Interesting.
The visuals speak so much to me. Mm-hmm. The work has always spoken so much to me, and it still does. And that's what captures my attention.
Yeah, I remember sitting on a panel years and years and years ago with an artist and a bunch of other reps. And I think there was just one photographer. He was a photographer, and I think there was just one of them on the panel. And we were all being asked questions about specifics in terms of marketing and emailing and sending out, at the time, postcards and creating portfolios. And it was just like all the kind of executional parts of what we do as a rep. And I remember the artist kind of just cut through all of it. And he raised his hand and he was just like, I just need to remind you all that all of this is very important, but it literally comes down to the work. If your work is not strong enough, good enough, relevant enough, commercial enough, whatever it is for that person, it doesn't matter how many emails or promos or portfolios or awards you have won, because it's not, it comes down to the work.
Right.
And I just think that has to be remembered. We all get caught up in the kind of the minutia and the to-do list around staying on people's radars, but it's very, very important for an artist to recognize they have to create new work. They have to, put themselves out there and share how their vision is evolving. And they need to give their rep the inventory to kind of push out there and talk to, give me an excuse to reach out to you.
Yeah.
Otherwise, all that other work it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I will say, listen, everyone is doing the best that they can in an ever-changing landscape that is moving at a pace that no one can possibly keep up with.
Correct.
So I think that I would encourage everyone to just take a breath and to really stay true to their artistry and to who they are and to the type of work that they want to create and the clients that they want to work on and the brands that they want to get involved with. And not go into panic mode about trying to keep up with an industry that is literally changing, not even by the day anymore. It's now by the hour.
Yeah.
It's literally by the hour every day. It's crazy. And I think what will help everyone and what will perpetuate professional happiness is to stay true to why you got into the business you got into, why you got into the discipline, what art you create makes you happy, and continue to do it, and not to conform, and not to try and please everyone, because at the end of the day, that's not possible. That's not reality. Yeah. And speaking for myself, it's just not something that's going to be done. You can't live in a space of trying to make everybody happy, because that's just not the world we live in.
No, it's so true. And as you said, it is changing by the hour, the minute, the second. We can't keep up. The amount of content that is required to...
It's crazy.
It's a lot. Although I have always said to art, photographers and directors, like, you have content already.
Right.
It is okay to show older work or recurate.
That's right.
Work that has a message, or you're trying to explain something about yourself and using the older work as examples. So you don't always, I don't want to say you don't always have to show new work. It is very important to create new work and evolve your vision.
Sure.
However, you've got the biggest library of content there is. So
growth is important.
Yeah.
And taking an evolution in your work is also very important. So I think, a friend of mine has always said this to me: you can look in the rear of your mirror, but don't stare.
Right.
And it's something that I sort of live by, because go back and look at all the work, look at your archives, look at your library, and learn from your own work. Inspire yourself from your own work, what you've done in the past to push you forward, because it's already there. It's right in front of you. And I just encourage everyone to continue living in like a really positive space, that they are doing what they can and the best that they can, and celebrate yourself, actually.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. So with that in mind, knowing that, people are evolving their work and the industry is changing all the time, what do you find the creatives that you're working with are gravitating towards? What type of work are they looking for or asking for when they reach out to you for help?
It's a little bit of a loaded question, because a lot of times, creatives, and I consider myself one as well, creatives, we all have our own individualized, tricky brains, and some can communicate what's inside of that brain and some cannot. I am one of those that can communicate exactly what's in my brain, but sometimes I have to interpret what a creative is coming to me for and start digging in and providing, early on a few ideas. Is this the direction, or is this the direction, or is that direction, or this direction? And some people come to me with very clear ideas, which allows me to hit the ground running, knowing exactly who I'm going to present back to them. So it really depends. I would also say at the level and stage of the creative where they are in their careers, for them to effectively communicate to me what they're seeking. I've always said, I'm here to make dreams come true. That's not only for, the creatives that I work with internally on both brand and agency side, but it's also for the vendors, the photographers, the directors, everyone that, I end up hiring for me to make their dreams come true. And that's my love language, and that's what makes me happy, to bridge all parties together to make dreams come true.
So, George, I'm really curious. When you get a request from a creative to help on a project and they need some inspiration and some links, tell me, what do you do?
I'll use the category of lifestyle as the example, to be honest, because lifestyle has taken on many lives and many interpretations throughout the years that I've been working in this business. So when people come to me wanting lifestyle imagery, it's a vague request, because everyone...
I've always said lifestyle is there's such a spectrum of lifestyle photography.
Yeah, everyone has their own interpretation of what lifestyle looks like, means, the color palette, the lighting, every which way. I will say years ago, I'll just use this as an example, the sun flare, the sun flare, the light in the lens look was massive, right?
Yep.
It was like there was not one lifestyle shot, not one lifestyle campaign out there in the world that did not have, sun flare. That grew old after a while. And then I think people caught on to the fact that lifestyle meant more, and it meant more in terms of not only subject matter, environment. It meant more with color palette. It meant more with lighting. It didn't just reflect, I'm in LA, so I'm just going to use this example.
Right.
So I hope this doesn't offend anybody, but it doesn't mean going to Venice Beach and at sundown and shooting. There was more thoughtfulness, I think, put into lifestyle post sun flare, is what I'll call it, that I think was really important. So when people come to me, for instance, for lifestyle, I have to be very clear with them on what you're asking me. Are you asking for sun flare lifestyle? Or are you asking for a color palette lifestyle? Are you asking for environmental lifestyle? Like, I have to kind of break it out for them to help hone in their thought process, to be able to communicate more effectively to me so that I can present people that is living in the world that is living in their head.
Yeah.
And we are wasting time.
I mean, you have to really know your stuff, right?
I need to know where to dig into. Mm-hmm. And so those are questions that I'll ask on the front end. So my time isn't wasted. We aren't wasting time looking at folks that aren't fitting the bill that is expected from the creatives that I'm partnered and collaborating with internally, and that we're keeping everything moved forward. So I have to really figure out what the right questions are so that I can sometimes get in the head of my creatives to bring to life options that live in the world and space that is living in their head that I'm trying to extract.
And then do you send them links to websites or Instagram? Like, how do you work?
Years ago, I would say that what the approach is that I would find photographers and I would pull their work and create a deck and present a deck that lived in the space in the world of the campaign that we were looking to shoot. Mm-hmm. That proved to be too time consuming, and everyone looks through a different lens when they're looking at the work. And so what I found was, because I would always provide the website link and the social media platforms and all of that along with the deck, and the imagery that I pulled may not live in the space that they're seeking, but once they dove into their website or those social media platforms, they found images that were reflective of the campaign that we wanted to shoot. And ultimately, the creatives build the creative deck to present for approvals. So I stopped doing that, and I just provided names and links and social media links, so that way we could, move the needle forward and a little bit quicker, as opposed to me taking so much time to create these decks that I felt became ineffective because, again, I'm looking through a different lens than they're looking through. Although
let them narrow it down to 3 people and then maybe put together a presentation.
That's right. That's right.
So thinking about the websites that the creatives end up looking at, what makes for a strong website, and what advice do you have for artists when looking at their own sites to make sure that it has or doesn't have?
Right. I think the biggest piece to the website conversation is functionality. If I don't know where to click, or if I'm clicking and it's not progressing, it's not moving forward, we all know, because of Instagram, we have an attention span, and I'm being generous when I say this, of 5 seconds.
Yeah.
That is a generous estimation of a human attention span current day. Yeah. Like, we just don't have the attention span, myself included. No,
and I start to click, and if I can't figure out my way around, I'm out. 100%, I'm out. So making sure the functionality of the website operates where it's user-friendly. And if that means you need to do test runs with friends, you need to do test runs with other people, because what may seem cool to you is not working on the other side for people who need to be looking at your work. Yeah.
And I will click right out of it. Yeah. I have no problem.
I know. And it's really important, I think, for artists to understand that. And unfortunately, it does make some of the websites feel a bit homogenous, right? Like they all are a bit the same because they follow the same formula or the same template. But honestly, you can still add some flair and some flavor to your own site and still
100%.
be functional and directional and easy to navigate, which I think is the key.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I know that everyone wants to present their work in the highest definition quality. That I completely understand. But what I will put out there is that I wonder if having the work at such high def on the websites is what slows it down, because that is another reason that I will click out. And there's a myriad of reasons that the website could be running slow. It could be your Wi-Fi connection. It could be where you are. It could be a myriad of reasons. So I would always encourage everyone to explore how their website can robustly operate. And if that means reducing the file sizes of the imagery, listen, it's a monitor. It's going to still look beautiful. Everything is going to still look gorgeous.
Well,
so
and you really only get one shot at it, right?
Right.
So, and I would say along the lines, I've talked about this lesson I learned a long time ago. It's very important to keep your website updated and changed around, right? Changing up the imagery and the experience, not redesigning it, but just making it feel fresh. Because you, George, it is your job to know your artists.
It is.
So if you keep going to James Smith's website and it's not changing, you're going to not go to her website anymore. So as equally as it is important for it to be a, user-friendly site, it needs to be updated, because you, George, will remember, and you're not going to send one of your creatives there if it's an annoying site or if it hasn't been updated in months.
Or if it buffers, or if there's not a proper click-through, or I won't, because I know that they're just going to click out of it.
Yeah.
And so I really think that there's an importance on paying attention on what happens with the website on the back end.
Yeah.
And really working with the developer, whether it be yourself or you hire somebody, to make sure that in any circumstances, and I'm not a tech person by no means, so, I don't want to give off the idea that I am, because I'm not. So I don't know if there's ways to test the websites out with all different scenarios that it will still load properly. But I really encourage that type of testing to transpire in advance of your site going live, of updates happening, so on and so forth.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's crucial. Okay, let's talk about something else that is...
Yeah. Bring it on.
Treatments.
Treatments. Yes. Treatments. Yeah. This one's a tough one.
When an artist creates them, right?
Yeah.
And you share them with the team, do you think your team reads them?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, they absolutely do. And they provide feedback.
Yeah, that's great.
They provide feedback. And it really helps the creatives to understand if the person, the talent, is the right partner for the project, to make sure that, they're in the right headspace of what we're trying to accomplish as a campaign. So they absolutely do. I do, however, know how much effort and time and resources goes into creating treatments. So I personally and professionally will not request that unless it's really needed.
Oh, that's great to hear.
Because I feel like everyone's time is super valuable, and it's my job, really, to determine if a treatment is really necessary or not. Because I know that the time that talent is taking to create that treatment is time away from other jobs they could be seeking or other opportunities they could be entertaining. So I'm very cognizant and aware and respectful of the time that is required to create those treatments and if it's worthy of requesting or not.
And then do you share the entire treatment with the client?
That usually is left up to when I'm on the agency side, that's left up to the accounting.
Uh-huh.
They're they run the show. When I am internal at brands, absolutely.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think it's important for them to know. And even if I'm managing an agency, when I'm on the brand side of the business, and there is a treatment that I'm aware of living in the world, I request it. Not all people do, but I do, to show the team so that we know where the agency's head is at. And we know the direction that they're seeking to take, because it's all about alignment. It's all about transparency. And I think one thing that lacks industry-wide is transparency, because people are operating sometimes in a place of fear for whatever those reasons are. I don't operate like that, because I feel transparency only sets everyone up for optimum success.
Yeah, I know. I think that's very important. And I do think, the art production part of our industry and the rep relationships, at least in my own experience, has only gotten better in that transparency conversation.
That makes me really happy to hear, because it is something that I have operated on for many years now. If I was calling you for a project with one of your artists and I know the budget, I'm going to be transparent about what the budget is, the timing, and I'm going to put the ball in your court to inform if you're interested or not, or if your artist is interested or not. And I feel like knowledge is power.
Yeah.
And if there is an opportunity for us to put our heads together to figure out how to make it work, the transparency lends for that conversation to transpire.
Yeah. And I just think that's really, really important, especially because, on where I sit on this side of the table, we have access to you and we have access to the creatives, and we can kill it on a creative call and do an amazing job on a treatment, and I can have a really strong relationship with you, and we all of us together collaborated and knocked it out of the park.
Right.
But we do not have direct access to the client.
Right.
So we hand it off to you all. You all bring it into the meeting.
That's right.
And maybe there's fear, like you talked about. Maybe the client has all the decision-making power. Maybe we weren't the recommend. I don't know. There's so many things that we aren't privy to in that meeting. And without having direct access to that client, having the transparency ahead of time makes us feel like we've set ourselves up for the best possible outcome. And there really is nothing else we can do if we didn't win, because there's nothing else that we can do. But when you're not transparent with us and we're operating at a deficit, not knowing what the budget is, or not knowing that another artist, got different specs than us, or whatever that it is, it makes the loss even feel greater.
Of course.
You feel like you weren't, given all the information.
Absolutely. And I think it's also important to note that whoever, and I'm speaking, agency side, whoever the client is that the agency is dealing with has bosses that they report to who ultimately will be making the decision.
Yeah.
And I know that firsthand, because when I'm on brand side, I know the structure. Yeah. I know who's making the decisions. So that's why it's a very layered process, and that's why having so many cooks in the kitchen can be prohibitive to the advancement of a project, just because of approval layers and so on and so forth. So, but again, having the transparency is really key. So that way, worst case scenario, you walk away, you aren't awarded the project. You did everything you could to get the project, given the information transparently that you were given.
Yeah. So I appreciate that. Okay. So before we wrap up today, I really am interested in touching a little bit on AI and seeing how many, different places you've worked and, your experience level. I'm curious, are you seeing it being used? Are you experiencing it on the brand level or on the agency level, or is it still kind of an experimentation mode where you've been?
Yeah.
Insights you can share on that?
It's still, I want to call it in its infancy. However, it's moving at a rate that is blowing everyone's minds right now. I think it's moving faster than anyone can even think to learn how to incorporate it into their work. I haven't personally experienced the use of it yet, or experienced the suggestion, I should say, of us using it yet. However, it will be happening. It's just a matter of time. And I'm personally trying to wrap my brain around it. And I'm trying to inform myself and learn as much as I can about it. But I think that human creativity is still very much at top of mind. And I think that people really do love the interaction, the collaboration, the partnership with human creativity. I think and this is, I could be completely off the rails here, but I think it's going to be used as a tool, not a replacement, if that makes sense. If I could compare it to anything, it would be compared to I'm not saying there's a direct comparison, but maybe an example of like when CGI came out, when that whole, world happened, everyone was freaking out and it's going to, take away human jobs and so on and so forth. I think it's that moment. The dust just needs to settle for people to understand how it's going to be used, in what capacity. No doubt there's going to be abuses to it, for sure. It's just, it's being made too accessible, too easy. There's definitely going to be abuses of it. But I do think that, generally speaking, there is the respect and the need for human connection and human creativity and interactions.
Yeah, you can't replace that.
You can't replace that. Because if we think about it, AI is really built on human creativity. AI is the aggregation of most human creativity.
Yeah. Well, and I tell my artists all the time, I'm like, you don't have to use it. You just have to understand it, because you're either going to have to talk about it and why you're either going to have to sell against it or you have to embrace it. So it's really important to understand it and not just poo-poo it.
That's right.
You have to get it and learn about it and read about it and talk to other artists who are using it and understand its capabilities, because it's just like when motion came around, there was a moment where it was pretty forgiving, right? And you didn't have to have it or understand how to use it. And then a moment where there was a bit of a grace period where you were learning and people were still considering you. And what is the one thing you opened up with on the call today is you said, if you don't have emotion on your site, I'm passing you by, right? So that moment is gone now. You either have it or you don't. So I feel like the same thing with AI. If you're going to embrace it and it is going to be part of what you're doing, learn it now. Understand it now, because the technology is going to surpass you.
That's right.
And you'll just be that much further behind, even if it means you're not going to use it, but you're just going to sell against it because you are talking about something more pure and different that is not AI. So I think it's really important for people to understand that.
Absolutely, and I'll be the first to say that I'm completely terrified by it.
Yeah,
I really am. Like, I'm completely terrified by it, and I have sort of been pushing against it for a while, up until just the past couple of weeks, where I decided I need to embrace it. I need to inform myself. I need to keep learning and learning and learning, because I'm in a similar position where I'm going to have conversations where people are going to say, well, can we do this in AI, or can we execute this in AI? And I'm going to have to now make the case for why that's not a good solution, why that's not a good route, or why human creativity, or how we do a blend of either or, you know? And, going back to the conversation about having motion or not on your website, that became relevant, because even if I was tasked with doing a still shoot, that is the sole intent purpose of that execution, it always ends up at the 11th hour with someone asking me for motion.
Yeah.
And that's why I had to pivot and look at photographers who can also execute motion, even if the original intent and ask was just for stills, because I know it's coming.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I'm sure if we had the same conversation, 3 months from now, it would be different because it's changing so fast.
That's right. And that's right. And we all have to, as long as you want to maintain being in this business, we all have to roll with all the punches that are coming at us, you know?
So let me ask you something, George. Before we leave, I ask everybody the same 2 questions, and I've been doing this for all 100 and something episodes, and I keep threatening to change. I keep saying that I keep changing it too, but I haven't. So I think I'm just committing to never changing these 2 questions.
Okay.
What is your favorite thing to do on a Sunday? And if you weren't a producer, what would you be?
Okay, so my favorite thing to do on a Sunday is not to be on a schedule.
Yes. Oh my God. You and my husband.
Not to make plans. I believe it is the one day of the week in our lives that should be allowed to wake up and allow the day to unfold and take you on a journey that is meant for that day.
Yes.
And not to commit to plans or having to rush out the door or to wake up to be somewhere. I think it's the one day everyone should allow themselves to not be committed.
I love it. I love it. I'll think of you this Sunday when I roll over and
I'll probably still be in bed myself, to be quite honest.
Okay. And what would you be if you weren't a producer, or what would you do?
So I've always loved interiors, residential interiors. And if I wasn't a producer, I would be an interior designer.
Interesting.
I have such a deep passion for residential design all across the board, external, internal.
Yeah.
I just really love beautiful things, and I guess that's why I still love producing, because I love creating beautiful things, but I also love creating beautiful spaces.
That's beautiful. Awesome. Okay, great. Well, George, this was such a lovely conversation. I've learned so much, and I'm sure our listeners have too, and it was so great to reconnect with you. It had been a little while, so it's nice.
It have been.
And I really appreciate your time, so thank you.
Again, thank you for having me. This was great, and this was a lot of fun.
Enjoy the rest of the day in LA.
Thank you. Speak soon.